Goldstone Report is much talked about in Israel and I guess throughout the world since Judge Goldstone announced the contents of the report, which were not pleasant reading for Israelis. And I think probably not pleasant reading for anybody who is a supporter of the State of Israel. And it goes right back to the question of how do you fight terrorism, how big a danger terrorism is, and is there a way of overcoming terrorism? There was a time in Israel when people said, you cannot eliminate terrorism by military means. That means you have to sit down and negotiate with them. You're not going to be able to stop them. The more moderate version of that strategy says you cannot defeat terrorism only by military means. Which means if you're going to use military means, you better, in parallel, also talk to them. So I have to be very frank with you and tell you that my opinion has always been that terrorism is to be defeated only by military means. Now, many people have thought that this was impossible, and Israel has proven that it is possible. But another terror weapon appeared, and it's the rocket. An unguided rocket, not a precision weapon. An unguided rocket is a weapon against civilians. Now, people in Britain in 1945 experienced unguided rockets, the V-2, and it caused many casualties. And it was intended to cause civilian casualties. It's not a military weapon. A terror weapon, pure and simple, launched against civilians, not accurate, doesn't have to be accurate when it's directed against a city. And it was clear that the only way to cease this kind of terrorism was to move the army into the areas from which the rockets were being launched, into Gaza. Now, there was much reluctance about taking that kind of move. And for a period of about 3 years, the people in the south of Israel were being terrorized by these rockets. Mr. Goldstone did not investigate this terrorism. The UN Human Rights Council, or whatever UN body it was that delegated him and the people around him to investigate Israeli war crimes, in quotation marks, never investigated the use of terror weapons against Israel's civilian population. And after 3 years, the government of Israel said enough. It could not have gone on any longer because the people living in these areas could not continue to live under this constant rain of rockets of this terrorist weapon. And that brought about the Gaza operation. And unfortunately, the Gaza operation was never completed. We should have gone in and eliminated the Hamas people in Gaza and put an end to their ability to make rockets, to bring in rockets from abroad, from Iran, through the tunnels. We just should have put an end to it because we should have known that as effective as the operation might have been, the minute we leave, if the Hamas is not eliminated, if an end to their ability to launch rockets is not brought about, we're going to see a renewal of these very efforts, and so Israel faces that problem today. You see, we do not see in the Arab world, I don't want to refer to the Muslim country, Iran, right? Where Ahmadinejad talks about the need to wipe Israel off the map. So if he does not sing songs of peace in Iran, you should not be surprised, because he's not talking about peace, and he's not thinking about peace. He's thinking about eliminating the state of Israel. But you do not see in the Arab world, painful as it may be to say that, a real desire for peace peace sake. because peace is such a wonderful thing, as I said in all the Israeli songs about peace. Egypt made peace with Israel not because they loved peace. It's because they decided after the Yom Kippur War that they could not beat Israel. And there was no point in starting another war against Israel. Not because peace is such a wonderful thing. And the peace we have with Egypt today is a cold peace. It's okay. We do not have to worry about security on the southern border. The Egyptians are not preparing for another war. I don't know if that's true forever, but it certainly has been true the past 30 years and probably will continue to be true for some time. There was a time when I was ambassador in Washington, the Secretary of State at the time said to me, you know, I hope they kick Israel out of the United Nations, because when they do, we, the United States, will leave also, and that will give us a good excuse. Well, I don't know if that's the position of the State Department at the present time, but it was a correct appraisal of the inherent problem that Israel faces at the United Nations with so many countries that have no respect for civil rights, that have no respect for democracy, that hate Israel, voting en bloc against Israel on every occasion that presents itself. You know that Israel cannot be a member of the Security Council. Every country in the United Nations gets its turn as being a member of the Security Council, including, as I mentioned, Libya, Syria, Bangladesh, Iran as well. Israel cannot be a member of the Security Council because Israel cannot marshal the votes that would give it a seat on the Security Council. So this is a problem that we face, that we have learned how to live with, that we can live with. It is very unfortunate that this human rights organization, and if you look at the composition of the membership of the organization, you know that nothing good will come out of it for the State of Israel, that they managed to convince a Jew, a Zionist, Judge Goldstone, to sit at the head of this investigating commission, which was charged not with looking into the fighting that took place in Gaza. It was charged with investigating Israeli war crimes. So that is the Goldstone Report. We will survive it. We will continue to fight terrorism using probably more humane methods than any other Israeli army, than any other army. But it's just one more difficulty among the many difficulties that Israel has faced in the past and will continue to face and will know how to overcome.